All right, let's dive into one of the most radical, ambitious, and just plain controversial nation building projects of the entire 20th century. This is the story of how one man didn't just save a country, he basically invented a new one by dragging a 600-year-old empire, kicking and screaming, into the modern world. So I want you to really think about this question. How do you do that? I mean, we're not just talking about drawing new borders on a map. We're talking about completely rewiring a people's entire identity, their laws, their language, even the hats they wear. And that was the absolutely massive challenge facing the man who would come to be known as Ataturk. Okay, so to get the full picture, we have to rewind to the end of World War I. The Ottoman Empire, which was once this huge global power, had picked the losing side, and the victorious allies, well, they didn't just humble it. They took a knife to the map and carved it up with something called the Treaty of Sevres, leaving just a tiny piece of the Turkish heartland, which was itself occupied and partitioned. It was about as bad as it could get. But one man, a celebrated war hero named Mustafa Kemal, just refused to accept this. He looked at that treaty and didn't see a peace deal. He saw a death sentence for his people. So he did what he knew how to do best. He got to work. He rallied a defeated, demoralized nation, organized a resistance, and got ready to fight for their very survival. And what happened next was just a stunning turnaround. Look at this timeline. In just 4 years, Kemal's forces kicked out the occupying powers. He abolished the Sultanate, which had been around for 6 centuries. He negotiated a brand new treaty that recognized Turkey as a fully independent nation. And then, on October 29, 1923, he officially proclaimed the Republic of Turkey. And to make the break with the past crystal clear, the capital was moved from Istanbul, the old imperial city, to Ankara, the heart of the resistance. But here's the thing. Winning the war, that was actually the easy part. Now came the real challenge, building a brand new nation from scratch. And Ataturk's vision, well, it was nothing short of a social heart transplant. It was a radical, top-down plan to forge a modern, secular, Western-style country. And this slide right here shows you just how deep those changes went. The old order, built on religious law and tradition, was taken apart piece by piece. Sharia law, gone, replaced with a modified version of the Swiss Civil Code, of all things. The authority of religious leaders, replaced by a secular government. Even the fez, that iconic symbol of the old empire, was banned in favor of modern Western hats and clothing. Every single change was designed to turn the country's face toward the West, toward the future. Now think about this for a second. Something as simple as your last name. Before 1934, most people in Turkey didn't have one. They were known by their first name and maybe their father's name or their town. This law wasn't just about paperwork. It was deeply symbolic. It helped create a new shared national identity where everyone was a citizen of the Republic first, not just a member of a certain tribe or religious group. So you see, these weren't just a random bunch of reforms. Ataturk built this whole revolution on a solid ideological foundation that came to be known as Kemalism, summed up perfectly by what are called the 6 arrows. At its core, Kemalism was all about achieving what Ataturk called contemporary civilization. What did that mean? Well, it meant catching up to and matching the West in science, law, industry, you name it. It was a completely forward-looking, unapologetically modernizing philosophy. And what's so fascinating is how these principles cover literally everything. You've got republicanism, which deals with how the government is structured. You've got statism, which basically meant that since there was no private industry, the government itself had to build the factories and the railroads. But maybe the 2 most revolutionary arrows were secularism and reformism. So let's look at a couple of examples of those in action. Get ready, because this is just incredible. To massively boost literacy and just modernize everything, Ataturk decided to scrap the Arabic script that had been used for centuries and replace it with a simpler Latin-based alphabet. And he didn't just sign a decree. He famously went on a tour of the country with a chalkboard, personally teaching the new letters to farmers and townspeople. Can you imagine that? I mean, just look at the difference. The old Arabic script is beautiful, but it was a really poor fit for the sounds of the Turkish language. The new Latin alphabet, a perfect match. And the results were just staggering. Literacy, which was under 10% before, shot up to over 30% in just about a decade. This one reform completely transformed Turkish society. But his reforms didn't stop with language, not by a long shot. In 1934, a time when women's right to vote was still a huge fight in many parts of Europe, Ataturk's Turkey granted women full political rights, the right to vote, and the right to be elected to office. And here's the really crucial part. This wasn't Turkey playing catch-up with the West. In this case, Turkey actually leaped ahead of many established European democracies like France and Italy. See, Ataturk wasn't just trying to copy other countries. He was trying to build what he believed was the ideal modern state, period. So how does all of this hold up today? Ataturk passed away in 1938, but his story is anything but over. His vision, his ghost, you might say, continues to shape and divide modern Turkey in ways you just can't ignore. His influence is still so profound. For decades, the Turkish military considered itself the official guardian of his secular vision, and they even stepped into politics a few times to protect it. His picture is literally everywhere, in schools, on money, in government offices, and it's actually a crime to insult his memory. It's like a cult of personality, but it's one that's tied to a very specific, very powerful political idea. And that really brings us to the central battle in Turkey today. As the country moves past its 100th birthday, its politics are pretty much defined by this tug-of-war between Ataturk's top-down, secular, modern ideal and a rising popular push for more religious, more conservative national identity. But his vision also shaped Turkey's place on the global stage. This famous motto, peace at home, peace in the world, was basically his foreign policy blueprint. It positioned Turkey not as an empire builder, but as a stable, modern country, acting as a strategic bridge between the East and the West, a role it still very much plays today. So we end up right back where we started, with a big question. Ataturk performed that social heart transplant on a national scale. There's no doubt he saved the Turkish nation from being wiped off the map, but he did it by demanding it change almost everything about itself, practically overnight. So what's the final verdict? Was he a liberator who gave his people a future, or a visionary who moved so fast that he created a cultural fault line that still shakes the nation today? That is the enduring question of Ataturk.